A wave of mental health illness has hit the British workforce, now the single biggest reason among the under 44s for not seeking work. It's now become an economic problem. What can be done about it? On the day that the economy showed again its inability to grow, a key problem remains the size of the workforce.
I'm in bed most of the day because I've got nothing to do, so nothing to achieve. So I would say the employment side is much better if I was in it.
We have an exclusive investigation into mental health among young workers from Ben and talk to the experts. Also tonight, who says there are questions over his son's business affairs. Good evening. In October, the economy shrank a bit, part of a generally stagnant growth picture, which is difficult to square with the heady promise from the PM of a growing economy. One of the key issues holding the economy back has been the shrinking workforce, caused disproportionately by workforce sickness, and this is especially the case with younger workers suffering from mental health illness. This is now the most common cause, according to a BBC Health Foundation investigation of young workers of limiting their work. Is this a new post-pandemic epidemic of ill health, or is it a greater propensity of young people to acknowledge mental ill health? Either way, it's affecting workers, businesses, the economy, and all of our wealth. And Ben has been investigating. Ben, what have you found?
Well, Faisal, let's start with those GDP figures you mentioned. They show the economy stagnant at best over the past 18 months. And one of the things the government wants to do to tackle that stagnation is to get more people back into the workforce to fill all those vacancies. That was a big theme, you'll remember, of the autumn statement and the government's recent Back to Work plan. So for context here, we had a really big surge in working age economic inactivity in the wake of the pandemic. Around 500,000 more people of working age not looking for a job, and most of those people on benefits. A large proportion are citing ill health, and one of the biggest drivers of that ill health is worsening mental health. And what's particularly concerning is that there's the rise in work-limiting mental health issues among younger people in their late teens, in their 20s, in their 30s. There's a debate, as you referenced, about how real this is. Is it simply that there's less stigma than there used to be? More people are willing to admit to it and talk about it. But what experts do agree on, Faisal, is that it should be addressed, and not just for the sake of the economy or the public finances, but for the individuals themselves, especially younger individuals. But obviously a key question, is the government's plan going to be effective in this regard? And that's what we've been investigating.
You going to have lunch? No. I have borderline personality disorder, also known as emotionally unstable personality disorder, and I also have bipolar. And then my mental health just deteriorated too quickly.
The government sees getting people like Rosanna back to work as a national economic imperative.
I can be very high and upbeat or very low and down to the point of suicidal ideation. I'm still not in the right place at the moment to work, and to expect me to work would be quite impossible to do. Mentally, I'm not ready. I can't guarantee what I'm going to be like 1 minute to the next.
Ill health has been driving the rise in working age inactivity in recent years. Since the pandemic, almost 500,000 more people of working age are giving long-term sickness as the reason for their inactivity. And poor mental health is a major driver of that rise in ill health. Around 660,000 more working age people are citing mental illness as a main or secondary health condition than in 2019. And 1.5 million more people are citing depression, nerves or anxiety. Worse mental health is certainly pushing up working age benefit claims. 20 years ago, psychiatric claims involving mental health made up around a quarter of benefit recipients. Now the share is closer to half. And one of the most striking trends involves younger people. As recently as 2013, mental health conditions, shown in red, among 16 to 34-year-olds were ranked lower than musculoskeletal ones as a cause of work limitations. But over the past decade, the share citing mental health as limiting their work capability has jumped from 1% to 4%. Mental ill health is now actually the most common cause of work-limiting conditions among those aged 44 years and younger. But is the alarming recorded rise in poor mental health among younger people real, or more of a reflection of their increasing willingness and ability to recognise it relative to older generations?
So there's been a massive cultural shift in what is acceptable to say about your inner experience and your mental health. So one possibility is that they're now just more willing to admit and talk about having mental health problems, which wouldn't be surprising because we've had all these campaigns and initiatives telling us to talk about our mental health problems. One difficulty when you adopt this language or this framework for understanding yourself in terms of saying, you know, I have anxiety or I have mental health problems, is that potentially the concern is that this can make people feel more vulnerable and actually less able to believe that they have agency to change their difficulties. So it can change the way people understand themselves. If they think I have anxiety, it can change the way people behave. So people might say, I can't put my hand up in class, or I can't do this presentation at work because I have anxiety.
Employment experts argue that two elements of the government's recent Back to Work plan regarding mental health are broadly sensible. More funding for NHS talking therapies and a scheme called Individual Placement and Support, which works with local mental health services. But they worry that the emphasis on sanctions for those who don't take up job offers could be counterproductive. And they stress that individual employers must be involved in job design. Digging into the data shows that education levels seem to be an important factor in this story. Younger people born in the 1970s and 80s with no qualifications are much more likely to report poor mental health than other age groups, around 20%. This compares with less than 10% of those born in the 1940s and 50s. Those with a degree at all ages are much less likely to report poor mental health. This suggests that differences in life opportunities and perhaps the higher income that can come from incapacity benefits relative to some low-paid jobs might be playing a role in work-limiting mental health problems. The bad news is that if this is right, it's going to make tackling it even more complex.
We know that having a meaningful daytime activity such as good work, and when I say good work, I mean work that's not only purposeful, that you feel you can master and that you're supported to undertake. We know that meaningful daytime activity is good for health generally. However, if you don't have a meaningful daytime activity, something purposeful to do, it's not so good for your health, and it's certainly not so good for your mental health.
I'd have days where I just wouldn't go in and I would just be stuck in bed all day. I've had very low, dark moments.
Idris Malik, who is 32, is currently economically inactive and receiving benefits for his anxiety, depression, and emotionally unstable personality disorder. But when he's in work in the retail sector, which he has been in recent years, his sickness benefits are reduced and he receives more money overall, around £700 more a month. And he wants to return for other reasons too, beyond the financial ones.
I think, it would be a better solution for me if I was in employment, because not being in it has detrimental effects, especially to my mental health, because it's caused me to be more depressed. And also, I'm in bed most of the day because I've got nothing to do, so nothing to achieve. Yeah. So, I would say the employment side is much better if I was in it.
This is in line with surveys which suggest a large proportion of people in inactivity due to ill health, like Idris, do want to return to work at some point, provided they get the right support from employers.
I have concerns about employers because they're not always understanding once you're in the face of it. I don't want to be staying at home all the time. I would like to be working. It would mean that I don't have to be a stay-at-home mum all the time, and my kids have someone to look up to, a role model. I'm going to watch Andy's Prehistoric Adventures.
Can you see yourself in work in maybe 5 years' time? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think at the moment it's just not realistic?
Not in 5 years. Hopefully in about 10 years, when I've gone through a lot more of my therapy, gone through a lot more help and support, and learning a lot more about how I tick and what triggers might be. I think it's important that ministers understand that it does take time, and to force people into situations is not going to help.
Well, joining me now is James Kirkup, Senior Fellow at the Social Market Foundation think tank, covering topics from public policy and economics, and Laura Bunt, who is the Chief Executive of Young Minds, a mental health charity focused on children and young adults. Laura, let's start with you. How serious is this issue? How many young people are we talking about?
I mean, we're facing an emergency in young people's mental health at the moment. Referrals to mental health services in the NHS are at record high. We're seeing more and more young people being referred to crisis support. Government's own figures say 1 in 5 young people are experiencing a probable mental health condition, and that's been a steep rise since 2019. 1 in 5.
So that's something that would require medical intervention of some description.
It's a sort of probable mental health condition that young people would need support with, and that's another challenge that we're seeing, which is that young people are really struggling to get that help. So waiting times to get support from the NHS, we're seeing young people waiting up to 2 years in some cases. And we know that when they are waiting and struggling to get the support that they need to help with their mental health, we're seeing mental health issues deteriorate. So young people being out of education, out of work, feeling isolated, being concerned about how that issue is going to deepen and progress. And it's really about getting access to early help that we know makes a real difference to young people.
So James, do you agree with that general picture? And then if so, what's causing it? Is it pandemic? Is it lockdown? Cost of living crisis? Social media?
Yes, I agree. It's a problem and a growing one. There's no single cause. The pandemic, is a huge issue. We are still, I think, as a country, we haven't properly come to terms with the impact that the pandemic and the mitigation measures put in place for it had on particularly young people.
So just dig down a little bit on that. So you're saying that the lockdown...
Yeah.
Particularly for young people. It kind of stands to reason, but I don't know what there's any evidence.
Teenagers, young adults, there are significant interruption to their life, their development at a really important time of their life. And I think we haven't, as an overall, processed that fully. That's only part of it. I think we have economic anxiety. We have social change. It's very easy to point the finger at mobile phones and social media, but it does change human experience. There is more, there's eternal connectivity. You're always exposed to causes of anxiety and stress. So what it is to be human in this society has changed fundamentally, and that may be having adverse mental health effects.
And some of Ben's charts, they were quite shocking, weren't they? In terms of it's become the biggest health issue.
Mental health is the big, according to the OBR, mental health conditions are the biggest driver of rising economic inactivity post-pandemic, and that inactivity is taking workers out of the workforce. If you're an employer, you can't hire all the people you need. You can't keep people you need in work. The economy as a whole is suffering along with the individuals because of this.
Well, let me ask both of you though. Part of this is young people have a different relationship with mental health than older groups. They're more willing to express it, say it, call it.
I mean, young people are facing unique pressures, as James was talking about, coming out of the pandemic into a cost of living crisis with all of the kind of global anxiety and insecurity that we're seeing in sort of today's world, and the proximity of all of that through technology and social media and the way that young people are impacted by that. And young people that we work with, that we meet, have a real literacy and are aware of mental health. They're able to support each other. They can talk about their own mental health, and that's really, really positive. But getting a referral for mental health support is quite challenging. These are doctors making referrals when they're concerned about a young person, or a young person's meeting a threshold of needing that support. So this isn't necessarily just young people self-diagnosing. Yes. This is young people who are being referred to crisis help or to mental health support, and often therefore having to wait to get that help.
So who determines this line then between what would be an everyday stress at work and then what would be an issue of mental health that would kind of legitimise time off work, require medical intervention? It's obviously a pinkish line, not a red line.
It's a conversation for society as a whole to have, because there is a need to define that line. I think it's really easy for 40-somethings like us to sit around harumph about snowflakes all self-diagnosing on the internet with having anxiety. But I think that there is an issue to be carefully explored there, which is that if everyone has a mental health problem, then nobody who has a genuine and grave problem can really get help. I mean, if we're going to describe normal human experience, anxiety, stress, sadness as a mental health problem, then we're going to devalue genuine mental health problems that need proper clinical help and support. I think I don't have the answer to the question. I think we need to have conversations like this at a much wider social.
So I mean, then the law. So what are you suggesting that within the 1 in 5, it may not be all the acute requiring a medical intervention type mental issue, or the 1 in 5 figure that you said?
I mean, I can talk about what we're seeing, which is the young people are really struggling, and young people who might be out of education, out of work, struggling to get out of bed, sleep patterns being affected, struggling with isolation, depression, low mood, impact on self-esteem. These are not sort of issues just to do with low level of anxiety. We're seeing more and more young people who are facing really, really difficult circumstances, and the impact of inequality, insecurity, young people who face discrimination, disadvantage, are therefore then more likely to struggle with mental health issues.
So, I mean, the solutions, we talked about early intervention. I mean, I'm curious about different generations in the workplace, where I think actually the conversation here might not be easy. Not everybody's really going to understand all of this.
It's not. I mean, you talked a little bit about welfare reform and the rest. This is not just something that government can solve by pulling policy levers. And there's a real role for employment and businesses. I mean, I'm sorry, you kindly introduced me from the Social Market Foundation. I'm also now these days a consultant for a firm called Appella. We have lots of big corporate clients, and they are all really concerned about this issue because they want to do the right thing, look after their staff, but also they want to make sure that they've got the recruits they need, and that those recruits stay in work. And so there's a real role for workplace mental health support. We're waiting for an overdue government response to a consultation on tax breaks and more support for workplace occupational mental health support. So it's not just the benefit system, it's got to be a change in attitude in the workplace and support that can be given for employers to support workers there.
We must leave that there. Thanks very much, Laura. Thanks, James, for coming in.